Okay, now I know this might not be a good idea just because I don't think there's any legit consensus on like the positioning of these movies. It's purely based on when you started watching them, at what age, at what phase were you in like, you know, the original trilogy, the sequel trilogy, or the new ones, right? Like Force Awakens onwards. I don't think there's a consensus that exists that is not tied directly to your age. So, I mean, I guess we'll see, but I don't think many people are gonna agree with me. But it doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't fucking matter because look at the title. Like, just, you know what you're here for. Don't look at me like that. You know what you're here for. All right, let's start off with episode 1. I will preface this by saying that I grew up with the prequel trilogy. That is what I grew up with. Now, before you put your pitchforks away, okay? I'm not a glazer. Okay, I'm not gonna do all this dick sucking for these movies. I'm aware that they're not the best ever. However, there are some redeeming qualities. Unfortunately, I think Phantom Menace has the least amount of redeeming qualities, which is why I would put it in C.
Oh, brother!
I'm gonna put episode 1 in C and not D, just because of Qui-Gon Jinn, Obi-Wan, and Darth Maul. That whole dynamic, that whole, like, just that part of the story is good. I definitely don't think the kid is as bad. The kid that plays Anakin, he's nowhere near as bad as people say. I think the main problem with this movie, realistically, is just, it just likes to fuck around. It doesn't like to take itself that seriously, which I don't know if I want my space opera with lightsabers and aliens and stuff to take itself that seriously, but at the same time, you are telling a pretty serious story, and you are a prequel to a like generational series of like trilogy, right? Like genre defining trilogy. So it's like, do you really want to not take yourself too seriously and really appeal to kids when a lot of the people who are gonna come see the movie are people who have seen the original trilogy? I don't know if that was the best course of action they could have taken. I don't think so. But do I think the movie's as bad as people say? Definitely not. Do I think it's the best thing ever? Fuck no. And I also don't necessarily blame that on one specific aspect of the movie. I don't think Jar Jar is the reason why the movie's ass. I don't think the kid is the reason why the movie's ass. I think the pacing sometimes is the reason why the movie's ass, especially in the back end of this movie. Good God. That fight between Darth Maul, Obi-Wan, and Qui-Gon is like timeless. To me, it's definitely the best. Well, maybe not the best, but it's one of the best. I think we'll get to the best. It's one of the best fights in the entire series. And it just gets bogged down by the fact that they keep cutting back to Jar Jar fumbling his way into winning a war. It's like, I don't care about this right now. You could do this all you want. I'm not gonna knock the movie for it, but it's like, that's not what I'm looking for right now. I'm looking to see the culmination of like, oh my god, there's a Sith. There were supposed to be no more Siths. What's going on? And it just gets really bogged down by unnecessary, just like filler, low key. So while it's not the best thing ever, I don't think it's the worst thing ever either.
They're like animals, and I slaughtered them like animals.
Episode 2, I will say, is probably like legit the least memorable, probably, of any Star Wars movie. It's just, It has some pretty memorable scenes, I suppose, but it's so clearly a setup movie for something that's not even shown unless you go into like extra media, whether it be like animated movies that aren't directly part of the main, like, you know, the main, what do you call 9 movies? Nonology? Huh? Anyways, it's not even part of that. Like, you have to go watch the animated show, the Clone Wars show, or you have to go watch, like the animated movies, which are pretty good, and I would probably rank them somewhat high in here as like an anthology series, kinda. But again, it lacks the detail that the Clone Wars TV show has. Now, the problem that the Clone Wars TV show has, without getting too much into it, is that it's treated like an anthology at first. It does follow a narrative structure, of course, but you're kind of jumping all over the war at different points of the war. Later on, it locks in and figures out how to tell a fucking coherent story. And if I miss an episode, well, it's fine. You know, I could just go back and watch it. I don't have to try to fucking watch an episode 3 seasons ago to figure out what happened now, right? So The problem is that this whole thing with the Clone Wars really bogs down not only 2, but also 3, but less 3, because 3, you can watch 3 and just assume shit happened before. The problem with 2 is that it builds up to something that technically never gets paid off if you don't watch the show. You just assume that a bunch of shit happens between 2 and 3, and that's pretty much it. Now, 3 tells the ending of a story, and although you may not have seen every parts in between, you can at least, you know, you kind of know where you are with 3. With 2, the problem is that, fuck, am I really gonna put it at the bottom? No, I can't do that. The problem with 2 is that it just feels lost. It's really the middle child, and I mean, it's technically the middle movie, but it really just feels like a middle child of a trilogy, and it just, I feel like there's too much of a well, I can't say there's too much of a time skip between 1 and 2. The time skip is fine. It's just like there's so much that happens between 1 and 2, and there's so much that happens after 2, or between 2 and 3, that 2 just kind of feels a little lost. And let's not forget that it's not like it's the best movie ever either. It tells an alright story, but Hayden Christensen is not at his best in this movie whatsoever. And I feel like Natalie Portman is just phoning it in low-key. Of course, Obi-Wan, Ewan McGregor, he's doing his thing. Literally the shining star of the entire trilogy. He really does his thing in these movies. But that's just kind of par for the course, so that's just kind of expected. Yeah, I don't know. It really has like middle child syndrome. And again, like I said, cool scenes, cool moments. It just feels a little lost. Oh, fuck! Now 3, and hey, pull out the pitchforks if you have to, because I'm about to glaze. 3 is amazing. I'm only gonna put 3 movies in the S tier. It's gonna be my top 3, and I'm actually gonna rank them in order. 3 is an amazing movie. 3 is so good because, although I will say, and we've already addressed this with 2, it does feel like it kind of starts off at a point that is like, wow, how the fuck did we get here? But it doesn't matter, because you start off fully assuming that like there was a war, that you could watch this movie having no idea what's happened before or what led up to the events that happened at the beginning of the movie, and it could still be a very enjoyable ride. Now, I will say that it's a little bit weird to have the main villain of 2, or one of the main villains of 2, being Dooku, get wrecked basically right at the beginning of 3. It's a little jarring, because it's like, okay, well, like I thought this guy was gonna be a big thing, and he just gets murked in the first 10 minutes. But again, there's that whole Clone Wars like context there. There is a lot that is, again, not too fleshed out between the 2 movies if you don't watch the extra shows, the extra media. But I still feel like it's an alright jumping off point for the movie. The end of Dooku is an okay jumping off point, because it starts to show the descent of Anakin into the dark side. Well, like the faster descent of Anakin into the dark side, which is what the whole prequel trilogy is about. So you start really seeing how he's vulnerable to things, how he feels like he's getting like cast out of things, like he feels like he's not part of the Jedi Order, he feels like he can't get what he wants out of the Jedi Order, so he starts looking for alternate ways to get what he wants, which is what brings them to Palpatine. It's done really, really well. The fights are pretty much at their best. Like if it's not the best, it's definitely up there. In my opinion, it's either between Darth Maul and Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan and Anakin on Mustafar. It's super dramatic too, in the best way possible, of course. It's good. It's a great movie that tells a very good story, and it's a very satisfying end to what is supposed to lead up to one of the best trilogies of all time. Now, Solo and Rogue One, they kind of had these random ass movies at some point that would just, what the purpose of them was, who fucking knows. If we were in this day and age, these would be shows, these would be Disney Plus shows, but they were released at the time when you didn't really have Star Wars shows like that. So Solo's all right. Solo's okay. It's definitely not as bad as people say. Does it need to exist? Absolutely not. It does not need to exist, especially considering they do not follow up on the post-credit scene, which probably would have made for a good movie. The sequel to Solo probably would have made a good movie, but this movie made no dollars, made no dineros. So they were never gonna make a sequel to this movie. Did I think it was bad? No. It was pretty enjoyable for what it was. I think just right off the rip, the fact that it wasn't Harrison Ford playing Solo, although it made no sense, it would have made no sense. to have Harrison Ford play Solo because this is a prequel movie. He was way too old at the time. It just didn't make sense. I don't know why people were upset about it, but whatever. I thought he did a good job. I thought the actor did a good job. I don't remember his name, but I thought the actor did a good job. I thought the story was somewhat compelling from what I remember. But again, the problem is it does not need to exist. So just the fact that something does not need to exist doesn't, I'm not gonna say it docks it points, but it makes it so it has a harder time justifying a higher rating. That being said, it is enjoyable for what it is.
We were on the verge of greatness. We were this close.
Only thing is, it's not as enjoyable as Rogue One, which again, Rogue One does not need to exist. You can have nothing between 3 and 4 and you would be fine. You don't need Rogue One to exist. But the thing with Rogue One is that it actually is a pretty enjoyable movie. It introduces enjoyable characters, so much so that one of them has, apparently, because I haven't watched it, apparently one of the best Disney Plus shows out there, right, in Andor. And the movie itself was interesting, compelling, while missing some of the key component parts of what makes Star Wars interesting, which is like the lightsabers, the Sith, the Force, like the Jedi. You had pretty much none of that until the end. None of that in Rogue One. And yet it's still made for a really interesting movie that sets up the events of 4 without feeling unneeded, without feeling like, it didn't feel like a side quest movie in the way that Solo does. It really felt like something that could fit very naturally in the story, and it didn't need a reason to exist. It was part of the natural flow of the story. Solo needed a reason to exist because it tells a story, or at least it tries to tell a story that would maybe link up with something like the Clone Wars or whatever, right? Because Darth Maul got most of his development in the Clone Wars. But it tries to tell a story, and then it just gets cut short. It just gets snipped right as it gets into telling a story that could tie into the main, Star Wars story that we're telling, like the Skywalker saga that we're kind of following, or that we've been following pretty much for everything that's like mainstream Star Wars. But Solo doesn't get that grace of having multiple movies to set up its premise or set up its end goal or whatever. Rogue One already has its end goal in mind as it starts. It already has an ending point that is directly related to the very beginning of one of the most influential movies of all time. So it's like, it kind of had a leg up already starting. Now, independently of that, it's just a good movie. It's just a fun and good movie that introduces interesting characters, interesting concepts, and does it well. So sometimes that's all you really need. You don't really need anything other than that.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
A New Hope. Now, I know I'm gonna ruffle some feathers with this. I'm gonna get some motherfuckers mad about this, but A New Hope, as good as the movie is, I do not believe that A New Hope is like the pinnacle of life. My only problem that I have with A New Hope is that it's a very slow movie. That's not shitting on it because it's slow. It's a product of its time. Production was different back then. Things being done were different back then, right? It's like the budgets were not as high, the technology was not as advanced. But I can't just put it at S and say, oh my god, I loved it. Like, I prefer the movies that come after it personally. And that's not to say that it's a bad movie by any means. It's ultra influential on like almost every sci-fi property that came after it. It's a one-of-a-kind achievement to be able to put this kind of movie at the time when it came out, and to have this kind of reception, and to create. The only reason I'm talking about these movies is because of this one. It has amazing storytelling, amazing set pieces, amazing everything. The actors are believable, they're compelling, they're interesting. It's very well made. I think it's just that I can't put it higher than the ones that come after it, because I feel like the ones that come after it are just done better. It's not really a diss on A New Hope, it's just I prefer what comes after.
It's not true. That's impossible.
And speaking of what comes after, I'll put Empire Strikes Back at the top. I'll put it at the top. I think it's the pinnacle of the original trilogy, and I think it's funny to juxtapose. You could juxtapose episode 2 and episode 5 like really easily, because episode 5 is also in that middle child category where like it follows up on 1, like there's a time skip after 1, and then there's a time skip between 5 and 6. But the only thing that 5 does well compared to 2 is that it sets up the time skip. So like when Luke pulls up at the beginning of Return of the Jedi, you're not asking questions, you're not wondering how we got there, you're just like, okay, this makes sense. And like there's a lot of carefully thought out setup in these movies to explain what happens in between them, which I feel like is lacking without the extra media from the prequel trilogy, or rather just 2 to 3. Let me just say 2 to 3. There's not really much to be said between 1 and 2, but between 2 and 3, I feel like there's a lot of things that are unsaid that should be said. The movie itself does an amazing job of telling a story where the villains win, which is not, it doesn't happen often. And the fact that it's, you know, kind of sandwiched between 1 and 2, where the good guys win in both, is it doesn't invalidate it, but you know, it kind of does affect, you know, the overall vision. It's not like they ended the trilogy with the villains winning. It's just like, it tells an interesting story where the villain wins, and usually that already subverts expectations, already kind of makes people more interested in the concept of the movie and the ideas behind the movie, and it's just very compelling. It's a very compelling story. Darth Vader is a timeless villain. The reveal that everyone already knows, well, not everyone, but that most people already know, super dramatic, super just over the top, and it's so good. It's so good, man. Just it's literally a space opera done to its highest degree. It's masterful the way that it's done. The set pieces this time around are even more interesting than in A New Hope. It's a different take on what A New Hope was doing. New locales, new like weather conditions, new, like it very much expanding the world of Star Wars, which was, I would not say limited in the first one, but it was more limited than in the second one. The second one, you see a lot more happen. The world opens up a lot more, and it just tells a better, not to this A New Hope, it tells a better and more compelling story.
Admiral, we have enemy ships in Sector 27.
It's a trap!
Return of the Jedi, I will also put at 1, just because I don't think A New Hope or Return of the Jedi tell a better story than Empire Strikes Back, but I think Return of the Jedi is still elite. It's still a great movie. It's still like a very interesting movie, very interesting. Interesting is the word, I think. Definitely the movie where they started, I would say, maybe taking themselves a little less seriously, not too much, but you know, Care Bears fucking swinging from tree to tree, killing soldiers with rocks is a little bit silly, but I don't mind. All right, I know I've heard this complaint in the past about the Ewoks kind of just, you know, being able to just destroy what is essentially like the empire of the world, right, or of the galaxy, with rocks and sticks and traps. I understand that complaint. The problem is it's very much established throughout the original trilogy that stormtroopers are useless as fuck. So it's not really that bad. It's like the Empire is extremely top heavy with the commanders, and then Vader, and then Palpatine. Like it's extremely top heavy with every stormtrooper essentially being a fucking dumbass, because they're dealing with Jedis. They're dealing with like beings that are stronger than regular dudes, which is why in these other shows where you see stormtroopers and stuff dealing with like regular civilians, they're much more threatening. I do appreciate that fact. That being said, sometimes they do look stupid, and it does kind of make it less believable, but I can excuse that. I don't really care for that. I think Return of the Jedi is a step forward for the franchise, because it innovates on a lot of things. Again, just like Empire Strikes Back, it very much expands the world. It expands things that happen in Star Wars. A lot of the things that we take for granted now in Star Wars have been expanded through Return of the Jedi, whether it be different colored lightsabers, not blue or red, whether it be because of a thing where they had to turn the lightsaber green instead of blue because of whatever, I don't remember the reason, but it just like it expands on the lore of Star Wars. It tells a very compelling end to the original trilogy, with the whole thing between Anakin, between Luke almost, you know, kind of going to the dark side at the end, but then not falling into the same trap his father fell into. It's all very melodramatic. It's all very over the top, and that's exactly what these movies have been like building up to. The first one, New Hope, very subdued, very much just telling a pretty I wouldn't say prototypical at the time. Now probably yes, but not at the time, obviously. But it tells a good story, but simple. You know, there's good guys, there's bad guys. That's pretty much it. Empire Strikes Back twists it on his head. Hey, I'm your father. There's more to it. You know, the villains win. It's like, oh my god, like this is like a real, like this shifts the story in another direction that New Hope wasn't taking it into. And you get to Return of the Jedi, and it kind of returns to form where like the good guys win, the bad guys lose. But the thing is, it does it in a way that makes you feel for these characters. At this point, you've seen Vader for 3 movies. He seems like this big threat, and then you learn that he has a link to the main character that you're attached to, and it's like, oh my god. Now it's like, what are we gonna do? Is his father? Is he just gonna kill him? We get to that fight at the end. It's like, oh, it's like, again, super dramatic. And then he ends up, like, I don't want to spoil too much for a movie that came out fucking 40 years ago, but it just tells a very interesting story, and it makes for a very interesting watching experience that's visually appealing, and is also just very interesting in terms of storytelling.
We'll use the Force. That's not how the Force works.
Okay, now the sequel trilogy, I'm aware, is very, very polarizing. And I'm not gonna do what everybody wants me to do. I'm not gonna put them all in D. That's not happening. Because I'm putting Force Awakens in S. That is top 3 Star Wars movie. Actually, let me order these. No, actually, I'm gonna order them at the end. Force Awakens is top 3. It's top 3 Star Wars movie. The pure hype, and this is not indicative of the rating, I'm just saying. The pure hype of seeing that first trailer when the Kylo Ren's lightsaber had the crossguard. People were making videos on that fucking crossguard for months. Motherfuckers were starved for Star Wars content. They couldn't get enough of the shit. They couldn't wait. And the movie comes out, and it's great. Now, I will say, as great as it is, it's safe. It's safe, realistically. It doesn't play too much on the story. It doesn't take too many risks. It doesn't try to change too much. But at the time, and this is very important, at the time, it looked like it was setting up very interesting things. You can literally see on the poster. It looked like it was setting up Finn, a former stormtrooper, as a Jedi. That's an amazing concept. It was setting up Rey, a random ass person, right? A random ass person, just like what you thought Luke Skywalker was at the time, into a person that was going to take down the Empire by beating Kylo Ren. Kylo Ren, who was, like, I guess the disciple of Vader. Like, you didn't know too much at the time, right? But it's just like, it was doing the thing where a lot of properties really just dive straight head on into nostalgia, and they try to do these things where they, call back. They do scenes that are clear callbacks to older scenes. They try to reintroduce characters that are just clear, not cash grabs, but almost, just trying to get a cheer here and there. But I think it's done well. I think it's one of the movies that does it well enough that it doesn't feel jarring. I just think it tells a story in an interesting way, setting up interesting premises for these characters, setting up big implications, especially at the end of Force Awakens, setting up huge implications with Luke being there, potentially training Rey. It's like really a passing of the torch moment, which the whole movie felt like a passing of the torch moment, which is kind of what these nostalgia movies try to do. But I think it did it in a way that didn't feel too contrived and didn't feel too annoying, I guess. Some movies really put it in your fucking face. That this is like, hey, look, jingling keys in front of your face. Look, here's the shit you liked from 40 years ago. This doesn't feel that way, at least not all the time. And I feel like the parts that it doesn't do that in, and the parts that it really innovates, like the Stormtrooper, like the Jedi Stormtrooper, potential Jedi Stormtrooper, unfortunately, I think it does really well. It also introduces very interesting characters. I think Kylo Ren is an interesting character. I think Rey is an interesting character. I loved Finn and Poe. I love their dynamic. It does the same good things that the 2 movies in S tier with it also do. And I think for that reason, it deserves more respect. And it's not just a cash grab movie. It's not just like a sellout movie, I guess, like a lot of these nostalgia movies are. It actually has a lot to say about Star Wars, and it actually, I would say, pushes the franchise forward. And now we get to Last Jedi, which is probably the most contentious. And like, this is the type of movie that like people will quit the list right now if I don't put it around where they think it should be. But I'm not a Last Jedi hater. I just can't say that I am. Where the first movie played it so safe, played it so close to the vest in a good way, and it's like I can't really put a movie that uses New Hope as its inspiration low, because it wouldn't make sense, right? New Hope is such a good movie. I can't put a movie that is inspired by it super low, especially when the execution is good or great, in my opinion. But the thing with The Last Jedi is that it completely flips things on its head. You get Force Awakens that tells a story that is very similar to an older story, and some people aren't too big a fan of that. So then Last Jedi comes in and says, you know what? We're gonna flip everything on its head. We're gonna completely change the status quo of what Star Wars is supposed to be, or what you expect Star Wars to be based on the first movie, and we're gonna tell a completely just left field story. This could have gone horribly bad, and it did for a few people, for a lot of people. Well, I'm gonna say a vocal minority, but it could have also gone very well. And I'm in the camp that I think it was done interestingly. Now, do I think that everything they did is perfect, is the right way that it should have gone, is the right way of telling the story that they set up in Force Awakens? Absolutely fucking not. I think the idea of making Finn anything but a Jedi is straight up silly. It's actually ridiculous. He was set up, you have John Boyega, okay, playing one of your main characters in your movie, being one of the most interesting selling points of the first movie, a stormtrooper turned Jedi that could take down the Empire. Like, that could help take down the Empire, not by himself, obviously. It's money printing. It's a money printing concept. Why don't you follow that direction? Because that was probably the original plan from Force Awakens, and then they just decided to flip it on its head. Did that pay off? Definitely not for Finn. But did it pay off for every other aspect of the movie? I would say so. I would say humanizing Kylo Ren a little more, showing his connection to Rey, showing the disdain that Luke has for, like, just Jedis in general, like just the Force in general, seeing him come around to that. It's done well. I also think the movie has some beautiful shots, like some of the best shots in the entire series, in my opinion. Especially one scene is probably one of my favorite scenes in the entire series, and it just does things again in an interesting way because it is willing to take some risks, as opposed to Force Awakens that came before it, where Force Awakens to me is amazing, but it does play it safe. Last Jedi to me is amazing as well, while taking some risks. The only reason I have it a little lower is just because it maybe flew too close to the sun. Maybe you could have told the story in a way that didn't completely shit on one of the main aspirations of the first movie, one of the most interesting stories set up in the first movie. But I think overall, it's a very compelling story, and I think the expectation subversion that is especially set up with Snoke, especially at the end when dude, like, I'm not even gonna say it, but like it's like, who in the right fucking mind expected that? Like, it really flips everything on its head, and I think it was interesting, and I think it was done well.
Somehow Palpatine returned.
Now the problem comes with Rise of the Skywalker. I don't think I'm the type of person that hates very many things. I've been accused in the past, rightfully so, of liking everything, which is fair. It's a fair assessment. I feel like a lot of people would agree when they see this list. But I do genuinely feel like Rise of the Skywalker is not irredeemably bad, but it's like, with hindsight, you know, at first when I saw it, I was like, oh, this was all right, you know, it was cool. I think a lot of the time I'm just happy to be here. I'm just happy to watch movies. I'm just happy to consume media and not think about it too much. But with Rise of the Skywalker, with some time to sit on it and think about it and just think about what kind of movie this is, I think it ruins what's set up in The Last Jedi. Now, for some people that might be a good thing because they hated The Last Jedi, but I think it's pretty unanimous that the execution of Rise of Skywalker is bad. It's not a movie that is particularly compelling in any way. It walks back a lot of the things that happened in Last Jedi, and I will say, although it is fine to feel like a movie tells a story that is not too interesting to you, I think the worst thing that a sequel can do is walk back everything that was set up in a movie, because then you're just working double time. You're working overtime here. Like, you're trying to close up a trilogy, especially a trilogy. You're trying to close up a trilogy that's been getting told a certain way for the past two movies by introducing new concepts that were not part of the original two movies. Like I said, you're working double time here. And unfortunately for Rise of the Skywalker, the double time doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Palpatine came back. What the fuck are we talking about? Why did he come back? What is this? Kylo Ren is just straight evil again? Why? Didn't we literally set up the gray area of Last Jedi? Why would you not have a thing where Rey is kind of gray, Kylo Ren's kind of gray, they kind of have to both battle with that idea? Why are you not setting that up? It just doesn't make sense. Putting Finn to the side even more than Last Jedi did. The thing that I find funny is that the only thing that they didn't fucking walk back is the bullshit idea of putting Finn to the side when he was literally one of the most interesting characters introduced in Force Awakens. I will never understand that decision. It doesn't make any sense. It never has. It never will. If you're gonna walk back the movie that you think did not tell the story that you wanted to tell, And also, obviously, the director change between the movies obviously does not help. But if you're gonna walk back the decisions that made Last Jedi into what it is, why don't you walk back the decision and put Finn at the forefront once again? I don't understand. It never made sense to me. It never will, like I said. But it is what it is. I think the whole, like, walking back the status quo that was set in Last Jedi, at the end of Last Jedi, only to still go the route of Kylo Ren being redeemed, doesn't really make sense. It's like, at this point, you're, like, as much as Force Awakens is inspired by A New Hope, Rise of Skywalker is inspired by Return of the Jedi to a fault. Like, it's bad. It should not be this inspired by Return of the Jedi. Reintroducing Palpatine just to kill him again. Redeeming Kylo Ren to a certain extent. Introducing things with the Force that frankly don't make fucking sense. And I will say, like, I'm not the type of dude that will shit on introducing new concepts with power systems in franchises. I'm not the dude that decides what works and what doesn't in these movies. But since when is teleportation a thing with the Force? I might be wrong here, but since when is teleportation a thing with the Force? But anyways, that doesn't really matter as much. That doesn't piss me off as much. It's just like, you have set up so much in the sequel trilogy up to this point. Why are we paying off things that nobody cares for? Why are we not paying off things that people do care for? It boggles my fucking mind how you could just fumble. And again, I came out of this movie not even hating it. I was like, it was alright. It was cool. Some of the things were whack. Some of the things were cool. But realistically, it's just, this is a fumble. This is a hard fucking fumble at the no yard line. How do you do that? How do you even do that? Even if you don't think The Last Jedi told the story you wanted to tell, just finish what The Last Jedi was saying. Because at least at the end, you could say you had a concise trilogy. And just like the prequel trilogy, people will come around. People are fucking sheep. They come around. It doesn't matter if they didn't like episode 2. You make an episode 3 that follows up on episode 2 and closes up the story nicely with a neat little bow. They're gonna fucking come around when they calm down. It's not worth fucking up your whole trilogy and just really leaving a sour taste in people's mouths, because it was the last movie that we got. And it's been the last Star Wars movie that we've had for a while, and it's just left a sour taste in people's mouths, both for the characters and the actors involved in these movies, and just everything in general. It's unfair to everyone involved to just hard pivot into a cliff. It doesn't make sense. Before I end it, I'm just gonna rank the top 3 in order. I would say Empire Strikes Back is my favorite, followed by 3, followed by 7. And nothing in B, I guess, because I don't know, what would I even put in B? Why do I even want to put something in B? Nothing has to be in B. It's fine. There's a gap between these two movies. There you go.